The DB Cooper case, man, it's one of those stories. It's got everything. A guy jumps out of a plane with a briefcase full of money, and he just vanishes. Poof, gone. No trace, really. Or at least, no solid trace. People have looked for decades. Investigators, amateur sleuths, they've all tried. They want to find him. They want to know what happened. But one of the most important pieces of evidence, maybe the most important, it got messed up. It got contaminated. We're talking about the tie DB Cooper left behind on the plane. And the story of how that tie, a key to solving the whole thing, got muddled, it's a big part of why the case stays cold. It's a real shame, actually. It wasn't like someone purposefully tried to ruin it. It wasn't some kind of cover-up or a rogue agent. No, it was just time. It was human nature. It was the way things were done back then. Forensic science wasn't what it is today. And a long, drawn-out investigation stretching over decades, that takes its toll on physical evidence, especially something as delicate as a piece of cloth. So let's go back. It's November 24th, 1971. The day before Thanksgiving, a man calling himself Dan Cooper buys a one-way ticket on Northwest Orient Flight 305. It's a short flight from Portland to Seattle. He's dressed neat. Dark suit, white shirt, a black tie. He orders a bourbon and soda. Then, mid-flight, he hands a note to a flight attendant. It's calm, cool. He says he has a bomb. He opens his briefcase a little, just enough to show some wires and sticks. He demands $200,000 in $20 bills and 4 parachutes. The plane lands in Seattle. The passengers get off, the money and parachutes get on. It's a tense scene. Cooper lets the crew refuel the plane. He gives them new instructions. Fly south towards Mexico City at a low altitude and slow speed. The plane takes off again. There are just a few crew members left on board with Cooper. Somewhere over southwestern Washington, between Seattle and Reno, he opens the aft stairs. That's the stairway at the back of the plane. He straps the money to his body. He puts on 2 parachutes. And then he jumps. Into the cold, dark night. Into the unknown. That's the last anyone ever saw of him. The plane lands in Reno. The FBI, local police, they swarm the scene. They know they have a major crime on their hands. An airborne bank robbery, really. And a missing person. Or a missing criminal. Or maybe just a missing body, no one knows. Now, the investigation starts immediately. The plane itself is a crime scene. It lands in Reno, Nevada. FBI agents, they get right on it. They go through the plane, every inch of it. They're looking for anything, any clue. They find a few things. Some cigarette butts. Money straps that Cooper had removed from the ransom cache, and there it is. On seat 18C, where Cooper had been sitting, they find a clip-on tie. A black tie. It's not fancy. It's just a plain dark tie, but it's Cooper's. He had taken it off before he jumped. Maybe it would have gotten in the way. Or maybe he just didn't need to look so formal anymore. This tie, it became a central piece of evidence right away. You see, the FBI agents at the scene, they knew what they were doing. They were trained, they bagged the tie, they cataloged it, they made sure the chain of custody started. This is super important for evidence. You need to know who handled it, when, and why, every step. It makes sure the evidence isn't tampered with, it makes sure it can be used in court if they ever catch the guy. So, the tie, along with the other bits and pieces, it goes to the FBI lab. This is in Washington, D.C. This is where the real scientific analysis begins. But we're talking about 1971. Forensic science was very different then. It wasn't like what you see on TV shows today. In DNA testing, not really a thing in the way we know it now. They couldn't pull a complete DNA profile from a few skin cells. That technology just didn't exist yet. What could they do? They could look for fingerprints. They dusted the tie. Did they find any? Not Cooper's, maybe smudges. They could look for hairs. Any hair stuck to the fabric. They could look for fibers. Any tiny threads that didn't belong to the tie itself. These might have come from Cooper's clothes, or his briefcase, or the flight attendants he came into contact with. They could do chemical analysis trying to find traces of anything unusual. The initial examination of the tie probably happened pretty fast. They were looking for something obvious. Something that would break the case wide open. But the tie was, well, it was just a tie. It was a simple, black piece of fabric. They found some trace materials, maybe some very fine hairs, maybe some fibers, but nothing that screamed, this is D.B. Cooper. Nothing that pointed to a specific person. No clear fingerprints, no magic bullet. So the tie gets processed. It gets examined. The initial findings are probably written up in a report, and then it goes into storage. The FBI lab has vaults, evidence rooms. It's kept safe, it's labeled, it's part of the official case file. But It's a cold case, even then. Cooper vanished. The money vanished. The hope of a quick arrest, that fades pretty fast. Years pass. Lots of years. The D.B. Cooper case becomes a legend. It's talked about in books, in movies, on TV. It's an unsolved mystery. The FBI, they keep the case open. It's never officially closed. But it's not an active daily investigation anymore. It's sitting there, waiting for a break, waiting for a tip, waiting for new technology. And that's the thing. New technology does come along. Over the decades, forensic science just explodes. It gets so much better. DNA profiling becomes incredibly powerful. You can get a full profile from just a few skin cells from a single hair root. Trace evidence analysis gets super sophisticated. They can identify tiny particles, specific types of pollen, unusual elements. These things could have been on Cooper's tie. So, every now and then as these new technologies emerge, the FBI pulls out the Cooper evidence again. They dust off the files, they bring out the tie. This is where the trouble starts. Think about it. This tie sits in a lab for 50 years. 50 years. In that time, how many people would have handled it? First, you have the initial agents on the plane. Then the first lab technicians in 1971. They're handling it, bagging it, examining it. They're using the best techniques they have at the time. But their techniques aren't perfect. Their understanding of contamination wasn't what it is now. Back then, maybe they wore gloves sometimes, maybe not always. Maybe they used new gloves for every single piece of evidence. Maybe not. It just wasn't the standard procedure like it is today. They didn't know how sensitive future DNA tests would be. They couldn't predict it. Then, decades later, when the case is reviewed, another set of lab technicians might pull it out. These are new people. They're looking at it with fresh eyes. Maybe a new supervisor wants to see it. An agent wants to check a detail. A researcher wants to review the old files. Each time it gets handled, even briefly, it's a risk. Imagine this, a lab tech in 1975 is working on several cases. Maybe they're looking at hair samples from a different suspect in another crime. They finished with one sample, then they pull out the Cooper tie. Maybe they've got tiny particles on their lab coat. Maybe they didn't change their gloves. Or maybe they just didn't wear gloves at all for some steps, thinking, oh, this is old evidence, it's already been examined. These things happen. They're not malicious acts. They're just the way labs operated, especially when the understanding of microcontamination was still evolving. And it's not just people directly touching it, it's the environment. Evidence storage rooms, they're not sterile, clean rooms. They're labs, they have dust, they have air particles, they have other evidence. Maybe the tie was in a paper bag. Paper isn't airtight forever. Over time, air and dust can get in. Small fibers can float around the room. Perhaps an evidence box was open nearby for another case. A tiny bit of something from that other box, a hair, a fiber, it could drift onto the Cooper tie. It's like a microscopic snowstorm. All these tiny bits settle everywhere. So, the tie, it's not just sitting untouched in a vacuum. It's in an active environment, an FBI lab for 50 years. It's pulled out. It's examined, it's put back, it's handled by agents, by analysts, by supervisors, by assistants, over and over. And each time there's a chance something new gets added to it, something that wasn't there when Cooper wore it. Think about a small, plain, black tie. It's made of polyester, it's got a clip, it was probably dry cleaned at some point before Cooper bought it. So any DNA on it would be mainly from Cooper himself. Skin cells, a stray hair. Maybe some fibers from his suit or his shirt. That's the pristine evidence. That's what they wanted. But then as the years go by, it collects more. A lab technician in 1985 breathes on it accidentally. A tiny droplet of saliva, invisible to the naked eye, lands on the fabric. That's their DNA. Another technician in 1998, they have a cat. A single cat hair, too small to notice, gets transferred from their clothes to the tie. Now you have cat DNA on there. An agent in 2005, excited about a new lead, pulls the tie out of its bag, places it on a table, maybe a table that wasn't perfectly cleaned after the last piece of evidence was on it. Now you have traces from that table, or from whatever else was on that table before. It's like making a stew. You start with good ingredients. But then, over the years, everyone who comes into the kitchen adds a little something to it. A pinch of this, a dash of that. Some of it's okay, some of it might not belong. And after a while, you don't really know what the original stew tasted like. It's just a mix of everything that's been put in. When modern forensic scientists got their hands on that tie, probably in the 2000s, when DNA analysis really hit its stride, they used incredibly sensitive techniques. They were hoping for a jackpot. They were hoping to find Cooper's DNA, to finally put a name to the legend. And they did find DNA, lots of it, too much of it actually. They found a mix of profiles. Not just one clean profile. They found male DNA, female DNA, and DNA that couldn't even be fully identified. They found all sorts of fibers. Fibers that didn't match anything from the original crime scene. They found trace elements, particles from all over the place. That's when the realization hit. The tie was contaminated. It wasn't a clean slate anymore. It was a forensic mess. It was a history of 50 years of human interaction, of lab work, of storage, all layered onto one small piece of fabric. It was like trying to read a message that had been written over many times by different people in different inks. You can see there's writing there, but figuring out the original message is almost impossible. The impact of this contamination was huge. It pretty much made the tie useless for definitive DNA identification. If you have 5 different DNA profiles on a tie, how do you know which one belongs to the skyjacker? You can't. You can't point to one profile and say, that's Cooper. It could be any of the agents, any of the lab techs, any of the dozens of people who touched it over the years. It's a frustrating dead end. It also casts a shadow of doubt on other pieces of evidence. If the tie was so contaminated, what about the cigarette butts? What about the money straps? Were they handled with the same less than perfect protocols over the years? It makes everything harder to trust. It means that what might have been a critical piece of evidence, a potential silver bullet, was now just a muddled mess. Why did this happen? It wasn't incompetence in a bad way, it was a product of its time. Back in the 70s, forensic scientists were doing their best with the tools and knowledge they had. They simply didn't foresee a future where a few skin cells could identify a person. They didn't have the same strict, sterile protocols that labs enforce today. Today, when you handle evidence, especially critical evidence, it's a whole different ballgame. You wear full PPE gloves, masks, lab coats, maybe even hairnets. You work in a dedicated, often filtered area. You use fresh, sterile tools for every step. Everything is logged with meticulous detail. That's because we know how easily DNA and other trace evidence can be transferred. The long drawn-out nature of the Cooper investigation also played a huge part. If the case had been solved in a year or two, the tie would have been handled by far fewer people. It would have spent less time in a lab environment. The chances of contamination would have been much lower. But 50 years is a very long time for a piece of evidence to stay pristine, especially when it's still considered active. So the FBI didn't lose control of the tie in a dramatic movie plot kind of way. There wasn't a moment where it was stolen or purposefully tampered with. It was a slow, gradual erosion of its integrity. It was 1,000 tiny, unintentional acts over 50 years, a brush here, a breath there, a shared lab surface. It was the natural byproduct of a case that stayed open, a piece of evidence that was revisited again and again by earnest people trying to solve a puzzle, but without the foresight of future technological advancements or the current understanding of microcontamination. The contaminated tie is in a way a perfect metaphor for the D.B. Cooper case itself. It's full of tantalizing clues, full of potential. You can almost see the answer there. But it's just out of reach. It's obscured by time, by the limitations of the past, and by the sheer unavoidable impact of human interaction. The tie is still a symbol, it's still part of the legend, but its ability to speak to us, to tell us who D.B. Cooper was, that voice has been muffled by all the other voices it has collected over the decades. And that's a real shame. The mystery continues, and the tie sits there, a silent witness to a crime, but also a testament to how complex and challenging it is to preserve truth across generations.